to another episode of the Sword and Sports Podcast, one man's journey to read 52 fantasy books in 52 weeks and create 52 podcasts documenting the experience. I am your host, Mike Mogues, the man embarking on this journey. And this week, I'm joined by lawyer, jiu-jitsu instructor, amateur anatomy expert, and winner of the Ditmar, Aurealis, and the Norma K Hemming Awards, author Sam Hawke, to talk about her incredible book, City of Lies, book 1 of the Poison War. And if you guys don't listen to this interview, which is coming up right after the book details, you are doing yourselves a horrible disservice because the book's incredible and Sam was an absolute blast to have on the show, so stick around. As a quick self-promo, you can find this podcast on all your podcast listening platforms. And you can find it on the YouTube channel where I'm doing full videos that take way too much time, and I'm pretty sure I'm looking at my camera right now and it's crooked. So if you're noticing that and it's really bothering you, just stick it out 3 more minutes because the Zoom interview is not crooked. Also, I'd really appreciate it if I could get some reviews and some ratings on all those platforms. It goes an incredibly long way towards getting more notice on this show. And I want to keep bringing these awesome fantasy reviews and these awesome fantasy authors. And with some reviews and ratings, this will continue to happen. For all details about upcoming episodes, including featured books, author interviews, and more, you can follow Swords and Sports on Twitter. And if you're looking for clips of the show, like you just want a little taste, like a little sampler, like the mini ice cream spoon at your local ice cream shop, and you're like, let me just try a little bit of the cookie dough monster mash, you can find it on Instagram. The handle is the same. Also, big announcement, which I'm pretty sure I announced already, but whatever. I will be participating in Self-Published Fantasy Month. So instead of last year where me and my ex-co-host Natalie pretended to be a part of it so that we could get clicks on the show, this year I'm really doing it. Justine from the Incredible Whispers and Wonders blog invited me to participate, essentially because all the other last year's participants are deep in Spiffbo right now and can't participate in the month. She essentially said, you're the only one with nothing else going on, so you're perfect for this thing. Next week, I will announce who will be on the show for September. I'm, of course, kidding. The book details. The book is City of Lies. The author is Sam Hawke, who, make no mistake about it, has the greatest last name for a fantasy author that I think I've heard yet. Or she's at least on the top 5 list. Maybe I'll do a top 5 list one day. The series is The Poison War. It was published on July 3rd, 2018. So one day before 4th of July. She's from Australia, so she doesn't give a shit about that. It is 503 pages. The publisher is Tor. And the books in the series are City of Lies and Hollow Empire, which, if you listen to the interview, she will say has been written about 87 times. So I'm pretty sure she probably got it right on the second time. As I mentioned in the beginning, she's won a fuck ton of awards, including the Ditmar Award, the Aurealis Award, and the Norma K Hemming Award. As always, this podcast is a spoilers podcast. Major plot lines are revealed in the interview, but also, because it's a spoilers podcast, I don't think I make this clear, we have a ton of fun. So if you're familiar with the book at all, you get to listen to all these incredible fun questions. And I don't think spoilers absolutely ruin wanting to buy a book. I actually think that in a lot of cases, it's better to know what you're getting yourself into. And I hope that these interviews highlight some of the most fun aspects of all the books, and that you think to yourself, fuck, that sounds great. I gotta get my hands on this. She's winning a ton of awards, so she doesn't fucking need you. No, she does. Everybody needs help, and everybody needs support. So, as I mentioned, this podcast contains spoilers for the following book, City of Lies by Sam Hawke. Without further ado, the incredible Sam Hawke. All right, it's another week, and I am beyond excited to be joined by the Ditmar, the Aurealis, the Norma K Hemming Award-winning author Sam Hawke to talk about her book City of Lies, which is book 1 of the Poison War. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike. It's lovely to be here.
I how quickly after writing a book that shows an intimate knowledge of poisons and poisoning did people stop coming over for dinner and drinks?
Oh, I'm wounded. I'm a very good cook, so people would never stop coming over. They just, give me a bit of side eye when we're eating. That's all. No. For that reason, all of my poisons are fictional in the book. So no one can be worried that I was writing an instructional manual on harming people.
No, if has any guest ever left and then contact you later, been like, I was feeling a little off about after that. Am I gonna die?
Not yet, but you're giving them ideas now, blaming me. I've never given anyone food poisoning or real poisoning.
That we know of.
That we know of.
I mean, you are a lawyer in your day job, so I think that you know how to skirt around admitting to any fault.
It's true. It's true.
Also, you're a jiu-jitsu instructor?
I am, yeah. My husband and I run a jiu-jitsu club together. We met at a karate club many years ago, and then I lured him across to the far superior martial art of jiu-jitsu. And so yeah, we run that together, and we also teach our two boys and our niece and nephew in our class as well. So it's a bit of a family affair. And we do, Chris is quite a serious judo player as well, which I do a bit more recreationally. But yeah, it's a martial arty sort of family.
Yeah, that's incredible. So I know that you met him at a karate class because I was following your awesome Twitter thread. That was how did you meet your husband? My question is, did you just keep beating him up till he asked you out?
Well, he beat me up on that first time, actually. Not in a traditional sense, but he gave me a very a very awkward block. He dropped an elbow on my foot when I was kicking him, which is a real dick move. You end up with a bruised top of foot with all the little bones in there and stuff. He was very unsympathetic, but actually he won me over through being unsympathetic, because when you're kind of the small, as a female martial artist, you're quite often the smallest person in the room, and quite often the only woman in the room as well. And when you spar with new people, you have that thing where some of them are just patronizing dicks who are like, oh, it's a girl, I'll
Right.
just, spar bad. And he didn't do any of that. He was like, no, you're good, full on. Let's have a fight. So no, he just started turning up to all the classes that I was in, and until we decided we should probably stop pretending that we were just sparring and actually go on a date.
That is such a great story. What was the best story that came out of that? I saw some wild ones. Like,
oh my God, there were some wild ones. Yeah, there was one this morning. I don't have my phone with me, so there was one this morning where somebody met their spouse when they were trying to deal with inheriting a massive porn collection, which that's my favorite one so far.
Oh my God, I have to find that one. I can't believe I missed that one.
It's from this morning. So go have a look, because that was my favorite one so far. There are some good ones. People it's funny when you tweet something like that. It came out of, I was having a conversation with some author friends of mine in our Discord where we were talking about internet dating, and sort of one of them jokingly said, I met my spouse the traditional way, by fake dating first, and then a couple of other people mentioned things which were really kind of romance novel tropes or rom-com tropes that had genuinely led to their meeting their partner, and which is what inspired me to put that tweet up. And it's funny because sort of most people have taken it straight and described how they actually met their partner. Some people have taken it as I don't know if they assumed I was joking and I didn't really meet my husband in increasingly ferocious karate battles. And so they've done sort of spoof ones or movie quotes or whatever. Some people have just got very, very plain Jane sort of stories, and other people have got porn collections. So,
that has to take the cake.
A fun break on Twitter to have just some random fun, lighthearted stories. It can be a bit of a hellhole at times, and nice to have cheerful things every now and again.
That was not only cheerful, it was hilarious. Like, I think my favorite one was that the guy met his now wife like throwing up in the bathroom, like ripping the toilet apart.
Oh yeah, that was his one. Yeah, I forgot that one. That was brilliant. That was an early lead. Projectile vomiting and tearing the lid off his toilet.
Oh my God,
that's very impressive.
That is almost more romantic than No, you're then getting beat up by your now husband.
Yeah, much more impressive.
I was reading a Reddit AMA you were doing, and you talked about one of the worst judo injuries that you ever took, and you said it's too long a story. Well, is now the time to tell that story?
Oh yeah, look, both my husband and I, we got our black belts together, and so the way that you do your black belt
Crazy.
in Japanese jiu-jitsu in our style, we were training partners for our whole jiu-jitsu career, um, and the way that you do the black belt course there is that you don't just grade just randomly. You have to be selected into a sort of a group of trainees who are going to brown belts who are going to go for their black belt. So you have to pass certain tests, be nominated, get accepted by the committee, and then you do an 18-month intensive training for your black belts. So we had a group of us, I think there was seven of us who did it together, and you basically spend your entire lives together for that 18 months. It's a very, very intensive thing where you're basically training every day, hours and hours of training, and you have no other life. So it's very handy if you are training with your your romantic partner as well, because otherwise you just wouldn't see them for 18 months.
Right.
So it worked out very well for Chris and I. Anyway, so it's a very full-on sort of thing, and you do get injuries. And so my worst one happened during that course where one of my training partners did a bad throw on me, and it's it's hard if you don't know judo, but it's basically a throw where you kind of put your foot just under the knee and sort of twist them over the knee, and it just went badly. He just put too much force on the knee, pushing in one direction while twisting in the other direction, and I knew straight away I was hurt quite badly, but I thought that it was my knee that was hurt, and so I sort of sat up for the rest of the class and came home with a very, very painful knee, thinking I'd possibly done something bad to the ligaments in the knee, and I had hurt my knee, but I didn't realize at the time that actually the serious injury was to my sacroiliac joint in my hips. But I just remember I was lying in bed that night, and I stopped being able to feel my legs, and I remember just thinking I can't move, and lying next to my husband just thinking, shit, am I going to be like paralyzed?
Oh my
Am I
God.
seriously injured? And I was in such a panic, but I didn't wake him up or anything. I just lay there in terror thinking, oh God, I've done something really bad. And anyway, so I then went to the doctor and so on. And the first physio I saw correctly diagnosed that I'd screwed up the sacroiliac joint. So the sacroiliac joint are the two little they're weird joints. They're where your pelvis, they're like the little dimples in your back, basically at the back of your hips. And they're a funny sort of joint that fits together. It's not like a ball joint or anything. It sort of fits together like a puzzle almost. And so the physio said, look, you've screwed this joint. Here are the exercises. Stay off it for X, Y, Z. So no problem. I did that. But all this time, you've got to continue to train. You can't not train,
Right.
because you fall behind the course. So you still try to do what you can. And the hip started getting a little bit better. I was on crutches for a while, but the hip started getting better after about a month or so. And I was training, but I just kept getting all of these injuries in my back. My back was just getting worse and worse, and I was in pain all the time. And I was referred to a chiropractor. I had a chiropractor, but I went to a different one who specializes in judo. And he took one look at my back. He took one look at my back and said, hang on, just walk for me. I had a look at the joint, and he said, look, oh my God, you have really, like, your sacroiliac joint isn't even in place. There's something really, really wrong with it. So I went and saw a better physio. And it turns out I had not just screwed the ligaments of the joint, which is what I knew I'd done. I had actually displaced the entire joint, and I'd been walking around and doing judo on like a hip joint that wasn't in place, basically, which is why I was getting so many secondary injuries. And then just began a horrible kind of 8 months in which I had to continue to train for my black belt with this horrible injury that you can't really fix. The physio could shove the joint back in place, and I could do a lot of strengthening exercises for the muscles all around it, try to keep it in place, but it would get knocked out about once a month, and I'd have to go back and get it put back in. And all the time, you're getting thrown hard into the ground hundreds of times a night. And it was just, you hit the ground, and I just have like 5 seconds of having absolute paralysis in my legs, not being able to feel anything. And it was really just a horrible period of time in which I had to do it, and
Story
then I had
is
to grade for my black belt with
worse and worse.
this injury. Yeah. So anyway, that was my worst judo injury, and it doesn't ever really get better. So the ligaments in my joint won't ever really heal. So I'm always prone to hurting it again. And then my husband did this much closer to our grading, I think 6 weeks before our grading, right near the end. Another bad throw happened, and he got his knee completely ruined, which is why he's done about his third, maybe fourth surgery on his knee now, 12 years later, because that injury was bad enough. So anyway, I'm now really selling Japanese jiu-jitsu to all of you, and you will get permanent injuries that will plague you for life. Anyway, it's a lot of fun though.
For everybody who isn't watching this on YouTube, we got not only an example of a judo throw, but we also got a little anatomy. There was a lot in there.
Oh yeah, I was forgetting. Of course, you'll just have the audio, won't you? Sorry,
No,
well,
we're putting this on video. Don't worry. all that incredible display will be shown. The story does end happy though. You did get the black belt.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Chris had to. He couldn't grade. His knee injury was not the kind of thing you can push through. So he had to have surgery, and he was out. So he had to recover and then grade the next year later, I think. So yeah, his did screw his grading for his black belt, unfortunately. Mine, I just foolishly pushed on through, creating permanent long-term issues for myself.
Nobody mess with Sam. She is tough as fuck. Oh my God, what a story. I had a few childhood questions for you.
Oh yeah.
You had a preschool teacher who mistranscribed your initial story, which led to you taking a bad picture when you were 4 years old. How did this inspire you to start making sure that you were the only one who was doing your writing?
I do. The reason that I remember that so well, I have no idea where you got that. I must have said it in an interview at some point. But the reason that particular mistranscription sticks in my mind is that we had a photograph of it was stuck on the wall, and there were a couple of childhood photographs that I looked at plenty of times that had that picture in the background. So it kind of just kept triggering the memory. But yes, it famously said, I can't remember, I was describing some sort of problem, and then the story finished with, and then I had an indeed, and it worked. Which demonstrates the teacher really wasn't listening to what I was saying. Clearly, I was trying to say I had an idea, although I love that I just skipped out what that idea was, which was some very lazy early writing on my part. Something I particularly hate when writers do is they come up with a supposedly clever solution, but they don't tell you what that solution actually is. No one likes that. So yes, perhaps that encouraged me to never let anybody else tell my stories for me.
So that's important to note, everybody. Never misquote her, because she will hold on to that for however many years it has been since that incident. I want to keep moving along. At 12, 13, you started writing an epic fantasy. Can I have that manuscript? I want to pass it off as my own.
Look, the manuscript that I started when I was 12 or 13, and I did finish that book at about age 16 or 17, I think. And that was my first completed book, although it probably changed quite a bit in the course of it. Look, there's some part of me that has never given up on going back and redoing it. There are still some ideas in there that I still want to do someday. So that is a back burner project that I still want to one day take some of the characters and ideas out of that really terrible manuscript and make them something decent. I think even when I was writing at the time, my tastes outstripped my talents by a long way. So I could see that I wasn't good enough for what I was doing, which, it's a sort of a frustrating thing where, similar to the kind of feeling where you read something amazing and you just think, fuck, I'll never be that good. Or like, this is the kind of thing I was trying for and I'm just falling short. But it's good. I mean, I think that's an important feeling as an artist to keep wanting to improve and knowing that sometimes your ideas are bigger than your skills at the time and that some might decide and wait until you're good enough to. But no, you can't have the manuscript. You would not want the manuscript. It's a terrible,
yes, I
terrible
would.
manuscript.
But, something that I'm catching here, and let's not bury the lead here. Most people, you say it's important for most artists to feel that way. Yeah, most people maybe feel that in their 20s or 30s, not when they're 14.
Believe me, people should feel it when they're 14. I think most of us, our ambitions outstrip our talents at age 14. But I was quite a precocious sort of child, and I had big ambitions for the things that I wanted. But I was sort of smart enough to know when I wasn't good enough for them.
You sound like you were very hard on yourself. But let's talk about one of your successes.
Oh yeah.
And it's not the book. No, it is. But the high school, in high school, you forged an English journal based on your reading, and you got away with it.
I did. Gosh, you have been doing your research. I did. That was a terrible incident of me just leaving something to the absolute last minute and just bowing out. I realized there was no way I could write this entire journal in a night. So yeah, I just started omitting large numbers of page numbers in the hope that when my teacher read it, she would think that she had dropped some, because of course this is all physical pages and stuff by computer. I just hoped that she'd think that she had dropped some pages in between and they'd been lost, and that I'd done some very insightful, excellent work in those pages. And then I found out that in fact she did not notice the missing pages, or that I had not done the work, proving that teachers had absolutely no interest in reading our terrible writing journals. So it all worked out in the end. I did her a solid, she did me a solid.
Right.
I got a good grade.
Do you think that because your idea was genius, by the way, just to write like page 8 and then page 11, and then she'd be like, oh, where the pages go? Do you think that she went, oh, thank God that those fucking pages aren't in there. I don't have to read anymore.
I think she just skimmed. I think she did what many people would do, and skimmed the first couple and the last couple, and then just assumed Sam's good at English. It's probably good work, and left it. That's my assumption. And she didn't bring it up. She didn't say anything about missing pages. When I did this, I didn't really expect to get away with it permanently. I thought I was buying myself more time. It was
a stalling tactic.
Yeah, it was a stalling tactic. Exactly. But it worked out much better than that, because then I didn't have to do the work at all, which is my perfect state of affairs, not doing work.
And that is Sam's origin story about how she got into forgery law. No, I have no idea what kind of law you practice. Okay, this is a real serious question. How hard is a Tim-Tam eating contest?
Oh, harder than you think. So we used to do this competitively when I was a teenager, and it's still a fun activity to do with overseas friends. Have you ever had a Tim-Tam?
What is it? I wanted to not sound stupid, but at this point you're putting me on the spot.
So
I don't know what a Tim-Tam is.
It's a famous Australian biscuit. So a biscuit in the Australian English sense, not in the American sense.
Right. I was thinking
not like a it's like a cookie, I guess. So it's a two-layered chocolate biscuit. It's a chocolate biscuit with a kind of a creamy chocolate filling coated in chocolate. So sort of Oreo-esque, but it tastes better than an Oreo, sorry. And they're bigger, they're like a little log sort of shape. I think it's something about probably like about the size of a little bit narrower than a credit card sort of size. And they're delicious, and they're like one of our most famous national exports. So if I go overseas, I always bring Tim-Tams because people love Tim-Tams. But anyway, it is a competition that you can do to try to eat 3 Tim-Tams in 1 minute. And this is a kind of competition that seems really easy until you attempt to do it. The first one takes you like 5 to 10 seconds. It's easy. You think I've got this. And the second one, you start thinking, mouth's starting to fill up with some sort of sludgy stuff. It's a bit harder, but you get through and you're still okay. You usually get through the second one by 35 seconds. And then the third one, it's just disaster zone. You realize you can no longer, it's turned to glug in your mouth. You can no longer swallow. It's just horrendous. So it's one of those things that people think they can do, and then they try it, and it's actually incredibly hard to do in a minute. But we used to do it all the time for fun, just to see who could eat Tim-Tams the fastest, because we were teenagers and we had fast metabolisms and too much time. So like famously people do the Tam Slam, which is where you put a a straw. You put a hole through the Tim-Tam, and then you suck your coffee or tea or hot beverage of choice up through the Tim-Tam, which I actually don't recommend people do this. I actually don't recommend it. It's messy. It gets chocolate all over your fingers. It's not that fun, and it's not a challenge the way the Tim-Tam challenge is. Anyway, if you ever get your hands on Tim-Tams, I wouldn't actually recommend doing it because it'll spoil your enjoyment of the biscuits. You'll have wasted 3 excellent biscuits.
No, I'm gonna do it now. Right the day after I release this podcast, I'm gonna also post the Tim-Tam challenge.
Well, you should do it on video so we can see you doing it.
I'm gonna post it. I'm gonna post that. I'm gonna cut that clip right there, and then the next clip is gonna be me doing the Tim-Tam challenge, and then the third clip's gonna be me puking or choking to death.
No, it's just physically just difficult to get it down. It won't make you puke or anything. And it's only 3 smallish biscuits, so it's not that you're actually overeating. It's just really difficult to get it done in 1 minute. It's like not quite enough time.
It reminds me of the cinnamon challenge.
What's the cinnamon challenge?
You just take a spoonful of cinnamon and you just have to swallow it without any water, and it just dries up and gets sucked in your throat.
Dries up your mouth. Yeah, it sounds quite similar to that actually.
Right. That's what I was thinking the whole time. Can you tell me more?
But really difficult.
Can you tell me more about General Pompey the Great eating mad honey? What the hell is mad honey?
Mad honey. So this is a fun like when you to give you a bit of background, my book's about poison testers. At the start of each chapter in the first book, we had a little sort of description of a poison and what symptoms it would give you and so on. But there's 30 odd chapters, and we didn't want to do it again for the second book because, firstly, I don't want to make up any more nouns. It's not my strength.
Smart move.
And also, I just sort of get a bit boring. So for the second book, we were putting little anecdotes about past poisonings. The devices that it's being written from the journals of the proofing family, and that was really cool because what it allowed me to do was to put in some of the fun poison research that I had done that I'd never got to use in the books. And one of the things I never actually got to use in the books was mad honey. So as I said before, I use fictional poisonings, but fictional poisons in my book, but a lot of them are based on real poisons, or like sort of twisted in some way that otherwise resemble real poisons. So I did a lot of research on poisons for the first book and then again for the second. And looked into sort of interesting and fun historical poisonings. And so a lot of those kind of inspired the little anecdotes in the second book before each chapter. And now mad honey, I've got a friend who's a beekeeper, and he had urged me to try to get this into the books at some point. There's a species of rhododendron that grows in certain parts of the world. Nepal, I think, is a big area in mountainous regions, where there's something in the flowers, so that when bees make honey, having pollinated those flowers, the honey contains, I can't even think of the name of the poison now, but it contains a toxin that causes hallucinations, basically. And they call it mad honey. And so if you make honey out of this, you can actually use it to cause hallucinations, and people have used it for sort of therapeutic purposes and relaxing meditation, that sort of thing. But one famous historical example is a general, I think Roman general chasing I can't remember who he was chasing, Greeks maybe, somebody but famously one army chasing another army, and the first army left out pots of mad honey by the side of the road. And General Pompey's army stopped, and I love that they saw honey by the roadside and were like, let's get into that.
I gotta cut.
They ate the mad honey.
If I see a bunch of pots of honey, I'm eating that every time.
Yeah, exactly. We're in the middle of a chase, but why not? There's honey. It's free.
You gotta stop for a honey break.
They ate it, and they all had hallucinations and went to sleep. And the first time he came back and slaughtered them all. Then like 1,000 people died. It was a crazy example. But I don't know if that's where the expression a honeypot came from. But anyway, they had been using this over history in these sort of various ways, and I really wanted to get mad honey into the books, but I just didn't have time to do it. I mean, I didn't have plot scope to do it, but then I was able to make a little fun anecdote in the second book in which some people ate mad honey, and thought that they could fly and jumped off the roof at a party, which was fun. And then my friend, the beekeeper, who you can follow on Twitter, he got some mad honey, some real mad honey, which apparently you're allowed to just import into Australia, which surprised me. But yeah, he got some sent over from Nepal, and he ate some, and he tweeted about his experiences. So you can find it linked from my Twitter.
So if Sam invites you over to eat some honey cakes, make sure that you don't drive there.
Look, I'm a goody. I didn't eat mad honey.
You did forge a high school paper. I just want to say the crime. You're not immune to crimes here. I'm just saying, if I see honey on the side of the road, I'm eating that every time. I don't blame the villagers. If I'm in the middle of a chase, I'm stopping. I'm taking a little sample.
Well, it'd be wasteful not to.
It'd be rude.
Yeah, rude. Exactly. Those nice villagers left that honey out for you.
Let's get into some book questions, because I think ending it on honey is just the perfect way. How hard is drunk archery? Because Hovind seems to do a good job.
Drunk archery. I reckon drunk archery would be quite tricky. I've never done archery myself, but it seems like the kind of thing where being able to focus would be useful. Jove does had some good luck in his performance of everything in general, but he's mostly not that competent. In fact, most of the characters in the book are not super competent at fighting, which is something you don't see in fantasy very often. Largely incompetent people doing their best when they have to, basically. But yeah, it feels like, I think if you're super well trained at something, then being drunk probably isn't that much of an imposition. I mean, I suppose it depends how you react to being drunk, actually. If your vision goes swimming, probably not so good. Yeah.
Oh yeah, don't do that.
Have you ever done archery?
No, I've never done archery. I imagine I would, by accident, shoot an arrow in the air and it would land right on my head.
Yeah.
I don't really have much.
Like, one of my kids really wants to have a go. I looked into an archery club recently because one of my kids really wants. But you have to be, I think you have to be 13 or something. And he's like 8-year-olds, shoot actual weapons.
That seems ridiculous to have that type of age restriction. Let's 4-year-olds shoot arrows. Why not?
I expect it's probably, I don't know if it's about responsibility or just about, like, maybe 8-year-olds probably aren't strong enough to pull back bows. I think it's quite hard. I've got friends who are good archers, and yeah, I think it's really hard work.
Well, work on your triceps a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
4-year-olds do some dips. Okay, it's funny that you mentioned that you had written some characters that were largely incompetent. Should Jove give up? Is it hard to write characters who suck at fighting when you and your spouse are excellent at fighting?
Yeah, it is hard, and it's quite hard as well when people are expecting, fight scenes from somebody who knows fighting, but you've set the book with 2 point of view characters, neither of whom can fight. Yeah, it's actually a bit of a challenge, but it's something I did on purpose because I think that a bit too much as I obviously love martial arts and fighting for funsies, and I love it in books and on movies and so on. But
everybody's
yeah,
hobbies.
but I also think that fantasy leans a bit hard into violence being the answer to everything. Just as a sort of a problem-solving device in fantasy. A lot of the time, problems are solved just by being better at fighting, either through hard work or some sort of mythological booster magic to make you good at fighting. And I kind of wanted to just examine that as an idea a bit and say, okay, what if your characters couldn't solve their problems just by being better at fighting than the other people? Which I think gives you different options for making your storytelling something a bit different in the genre. So yeah, it was hard though, because the key is making fights that still work, and all of my fights work. They're all things that are real ways that real fights could go. And sometimes I make my husband come in while I do some things to sort of reenact how it's working, to make sure that oh
my God, you need to put that out there.
But you have to do it in a way that that works for somebody who knows a little bit, but not very much. So things that kind of work as instinctive defenses, and how something would work with somebody of a different size, or using a different weapon, and so on. So yeah, it's a big challenge to make the fights still work and still be interesting, but be believable for somebody who isn't a great fighter. That was a huge challenge to do that. I hope I succeeded. But yeah, it's definitely causes you some storytelling challenges if you can't just fight your way out of things.
There is something that Joe is very good at, and I wanted to know, if we gave him a Fitbit, what do you think? How many steps on average do you think he would average in a day? Because he's a pacer.
Yeah, he's a pacer. Yeah. I reckon he'd do a good 40,000 steps a day.
Ooh.
Yeah. Because I figure they do, in the course of the book, they do a lot of walking around the city. And I deliberately kind of made a city that was intended to be sort of, the city I modeled it on size wise was ancient Pompey, because it's big enough to support the kind of population that I wanted, but small enough that you can walk around it realistically from any point to any point. You can kind of get there. And because I was setting the story in a city that doesn't have, a lot of transportation options, you have to be able to get places, you have to be able to walk mostly. So they do a lot of walking around the city, which means he adds these steps. But obviously, pacing is a technique that it's something his body does to process anxiety. So he does a lot of pacing in the book as well. So yeah, I reckon, what do they say? You're supposed to get 10,000 steps a day as a kind of,
that's what they say.
So sort of normal average. So I figure, yeah, he probably does 4 or 5 times the average.
Ooh, man, he's got to be in shape. I like to imagine this world where the job of the proofer started out as a way to help the chancellor manage their weight. Because what do they do if they want like a midnight snack?
Yeah, that's true. They'd have to either set it up in advance. They'd have to know, I'm going to need to have a snack, so I want that snack next to my bed, and set it up. Or I guess they just have to, wake their proofer up at ungodly hours. It would be a good weight management tool. If you felt, I suppose if you were super selfish and entitled, it probably wouldn't matter. But we were trying for a society that wasn't quite modeled around that, all hail the king sort of thing. I think the government in their society is a little bit less.
I think it's the
less
opposite.
Self-involved than a monarchy.
It's like all hate the king.
Yeah, well, look, monarchies are another thing that fantasy is a bit reliant on, and the idea of rulership through hereditary passage of title isn't a super great idea, historically. Again, although we do have a hereditary aspect to the chancellorship in the story, I still made it based around a ruling council, half of which is people who are elected by their respective guilds, rather than having it being a dictatorship for one hereditary line. Because again, although you see it a lot in fantasy, it's not really a great model. I was trying not to romanticize things that actually aren't great ideas in practice.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think Tane's ears are really big enough that people would forget that he lost the city? How big do your ears got? They got to be elephant sized.
I don't think your ears have to be that big to have your best mate make fun of them.
Okay, that's a good point. One of the key, I guess, magical aspects of this book is Oswarren, who is one of the great spirits. And
we're in spoiler territory now. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're a little bit. So after seeing him start geysering people to death, did the Celestians kind of have a point in trying to kill all the Darfur spirits?
It wasn't a very gentle reintroduction to magic. But yeah, look, one of the main tensions of the second book is how does this society deal with the fact that that actually this stuff is real, and not just real, but potentially massively destructive. And yeah, like how do you balance the wrongs that you did against a population with kind of fears about what that population is capable of, and so on. So that's one of the major conflicts of the second book.
Listen,
and yeah,
I'm hard against the system of oppression, but I'm not sure if I'm convinced that these spirits are a good thing.
yeah. As I said, it wasn't a gentle reintroduction to magic in the context, but yeah. Yeah, he did a bit of damage.
Now, I mean, basically, it turned out to like we're all going to be unite because this guy is scary as fuck.
Yeah. Turns out, even when you were, sort of essentially worshipping them, they're still scary as fuck, and you can still be guided to death. I mean, part of the sort of thematic thing is that if you completely ignore and neglect something, when it comes back and bursts free, it might not be in your interests. Okay.
Should the speakers have to change their name after they were all silent when finally confronting their great spirit?
Yeah, well, look, if you've been working under one set of assumptions your whole life, and then things change dramatically, you're going to have to make changes too.
Are the Darfrey spirits voyeurs? Because I find it funny that one of the ways that you can, make like worship to them is to have sex in one of their spirit spaces.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, some of them obviously enjoy that. I think the idea behind it is that they kind of absorb emotion, so sort of times of great emotion, and yeah, sometimes good positive emotion, and some of them might enjoy a bit of voyeurism.
Speaks to humans, where the first thing we think of, oh, we need great emotion. Let's not try to tap into our inner selves. We'll just have sex and that'll do the job. How awesome does Turpar make you at sports? Because
how often does what make me at sports?
It's hard. The mineral that people were taking for PEDs to get better at javelin throwing.
Oh, right. I have no idea how much better it makes you at sports. What does it improve? Your muscle tone? Is it?
I don't know. The javelin thrower got banned from the game, Celestian Games, for using it.
Oh, right. So, sorry, I thought you were talking about javelin. I thought we'd bypass into the real Olympics.
Which are going on, by the way.
Well, I know, this is very confusing. I thought we just had another doping scandal that I'd missed. Sorry, see, I throw all these little world building things in, and then promptly forget them, clearly. Clearly it gives you an unfair advantage. And Celestians love their sports, so you've got to keep a level playing field. I think, like, actually, I was really amused when I saw your podcast was sports and swords and sports, because I'm a big passionate believer in there being sport in fantasy, because it's such a huge part of every human civilization has loved and embraced sport, and you just don't see it in fantasy all the time. It's one of the things that gets left out in people's world building quite often, and it annoys me, because it's very unlikely that your civilization doesn't have sport that people are into. So yeah, I mean, hence part of the reason why I set the second book in the effectively the fantasy Olympics, because I wanted to be like, sport.
Woo!
There's not a lot of time for sport. In the first book, obviously, it's set in the middle of a siege, so people aren't doing a lot of recreational stuff, which leaves you limited opportunities to showcase the things that people do when they're not under siege, and terrified for their lives all the time.
I think that's a good lead in. I like to pitch terrible novella ideas at authors, awesome. And I've got one based on this. So
okay.
Before the siege happens, it's kind of a prequel. In the Celestian Games, Edric has lost his last race. He's despairing, and he doesn't know how to motivate himself until he discovers the power of song. And as he learns to tap into his artistic side, he slowly starts to realize that he does have the push to be the best runner that he could be. It's a ripoff of High School Musical.
Look, I love a sports narrative. I showed my kids the Mighty Ducks
Woo!
the other day, which was very exciting for them. And that's a classic film from my childhood. Yeah, look, I love a sports narrative. I'm not a huge team sport player myself.
No, you're a
And
killer.
I wasn't really into any sports until I discovered I could do martial arts. It's like, oh, this one works for me.
It was only until the stakes were violence and hurting other people were you into it.
Yeah, I'm not a huge player of team sports, so I only really liked individual sports, which aren't typically the ones that you do when you're kids. All the girls were doing netball when I was a kid, and my mum was very opposed to netball because of knee injuries, and everyone got into soccer later, but sort of a couple of years below my generations. My younger brother and sister, soccer was the game that all primary school kids played. But before that, it was netball or softball, and yeah, I didn't really. I was too short for basketball. My sister played basketball. I was a shrimp, so I wasn't ever going to play basketball. I liked basketball. Mum was opposed to netball, and I tried to play softball and spent most of the time doing cartwheels in the outfield. It's not
That's fun too.
Softball's not actually a great game for small kids because there's like 3 positions that do anything, and all of the field positions you're basically just standing there. So it wasn't a great introduction to team sports. So yeah, aside from martial arts, I never really did much team sports, but I love watching team sports. And I love sports narratives, so I really enjoy watching movies about sport, even if I don't care about the sport. And like the sort of big example that everyone's into at the moment is Ted Lasso. I couldn't care less about football/soccer.
Show's good,
but it doesn't
though.
matter at all because it's not.
Right.
The show's so good. And it's not. It doesn't, like, the actual sport part isn't important. But it just shows you how sort of powerful a sport narrative can be as a literary device and a storytelling device. And I just read a friend of mine is just writing sort of ice skating romances. I just read the first one of those the other day too. And I really enjoy a sports narrative to tell a story around. So yeah, it's a powerful thing, I think. And I love your novella, and you should totally do it. I give you permission.
Oh no, I have no talent. These are ideas I pitch for someone else more talented to do.
Oh, somebody else is doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
I
mean,
I know
novellas because they're so short. Right. I can't write anything that's not hundreds of thousands of words long.
Right, especially with the second one where you said you had to write the book like 7 times.
I wrote it several times, probably not 7. I wrote one version which was too long, but that I had to cut a third of it out. And then my publisher didn't like it, so I had to throw that away and start again. So I effectively wrote it twice, maybe 3 times.
All right. On a different note, one of the goals of this podcast, besides cracking terrible jokes, is to kind of is to break the stereotypical outside view of what fantasy is. The kind of male-centric, slaying the dragon, sleeping with all the women, farmer turns hero, untouchable god that's read by kind of like neckbeards dwelling in their mom's basement playing video games all day. What about your books breaks that traditional mold and brings fantasy to either the general public or in a different direction?
Well, I mean, I don't think fantasy has ever really been that, except for a certain proportion of readers who are always going to be looking for that particular story. Modern fantasy is really nothing like that. Like nothing that's been published in the last kind of 5 or 10 years is sort of anywhere near that old classic mold. I think for me, I grew up in the 80s and 90s reading effectively anything that made it to shelves in Australia. So we had this idea that only men wrote fantasy, or that fantasy was for men, is a really Northern Hemisphere sort of concept, I think, because when I kind of was reading as a teenager and even into my 20s, I'm old, so this is before anyone was on the internet. So there was I sort of had no idea what people overseas thought about fantasy. But in Australia, all of the fantasy authors were women. That was like the big authors of the 80s, so the 80s through the 2000s here were largely women. There were a couple of men writing fantasy, but it was mostly women. So the sort of divide here that I saw in my kind of limited fan experience, and again, it's hard in Australia because it's so geographically separate, and I'd never gone to a convention or anything. I don't know if we even had them in those times, but my impression was that the kind of boy genre was science fiction and the girl genre was fantasy. But having said that, a lot of the books that were published in that kind of earlier time in particular do contain a lot of, you know, really misogynistic sort of structures. And not all of them, because as I said, a lot of the ones I was reading were by women, which were always better at not doing that. But still, it was still there. So by the time I actually came to write something, I think that the genre had well and truly moved past that. But even so, it's still something important to me to not be marketing to that kind of classic reader, or that perception of what a reader is. My kind of dramatically so, my books don't have a patriarchy just you know, setting up the society. So there's no concept of marriage in the country that my books are set in. And once you remove marriage as a kind of cornerstone of social foundation, you open up all kinds of different world-building changes to how society is structured. So you sort of eliminate a lot of the patriarchal constructs that you see replicated in fantasy a lot. You know, sexual violence against women, and women being treated as property, and you know, the way that people's children are and property lines pass through male lines. All of that stuff, which has given rise to many traditional conflicts in fantasy, and sort of many narratives about even fantasy books that had women in them. They were kind of often sort of, you know, the Arya Starks, the girl who's not like other girls kind of thing. And so a lot of books have kind of traditionally fallen into that. Even when they're challenging patriarchal notions, they're doing so from perspective that they're there and we're fighting against them. Whereas I wanted to set up a society where those issues just weren't there. So it's a gender equal society in which your gender doesn't define what job or skills you might have or explore. People don't grow up and leave the family home and move in with a romantic partner. They're free to have as many romantic partners as they want, but they raise their children. Women raise their children with their immediate families, so with their siblings and their mother, and they nominate a trusted male relative to be like an influential male in the child's life. So yeah, it's completely different social structure, which a lot of people dig, and some dudes really can't get their heads around. So,
well, I think they need to get
it's totally fine to have
it.
giant spirits geysering people from a lake, but if you say some of the soldiers are women, some men's heads will explode. But yeah. Yeah, so yeah, that's like we definitely do need those narratives about you know, people fighting against bad systems, but we don't need them all the time either. And sometimes we just need a perception of a world where things are just different. Plus, it's fun. It's fun messing around with what like basic assumptions about families and society. It opens up all kinds of fun world building opportunities when you don't do that.
And you did it in such a creative and excellent way. And I think that really comes across well. But one of my biggest takeaways is that the real moral of this story is that drugs are good, since it's only through finding the drug dealer that people were able to be saved.
I mean, I don't know if that was the moral I was going for. I said I was a goody goody. Yeah, look, drug use actually ends up being a bigger plot point in the second book as well.
So do drugs, kids. No, I'm kidding.
A bad recreational drug in the second book.
It's not the takeaway. Maybe I missed the point. Okay. My possibly last question is: are Jove and Hadrea turned on by completely neglecting responsibility? They picked the worst times to decide to go at it.
I know they do. That's my romance theme for the novel is sex in inappropriate places. I mean, they're not romantic books. And the social structure leads itself to a kind of position where, you know, sex is perceived differently in Salasa than it would be here. So there's a certain sort of lack of inhibitions issue, but mostly it's just, I think that stressful situations require emotional outlets. And in this particular case, the emotional outlets were the physical outlet of someone who you kind of had a bit of tension with.
The underground under the lake while there's a siege going on is funny, but I really was like, but while your best friend is basically lying dead and you're unsure if he's ever going to be mentally coming back home, and you think, what should we do? Leave his ass.
They don't always make great decisions.
Hey, they're kids. Gotta cut them some slack.
They're in a very tense situation, and people form strange emotional bonds and do weird things when they're under very great stress. And those were very time for them.
My takeaway was screw your friend. Forget that guy. He's not coming back. I think that was everything I had. Where can people find you?
My AirPods just ran out of batteries, so it's switched.
Oh my God.
Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry. The sound will probably just be a bit worse. Clearly my AirPods did not like how long our conversation was.
Oh my God. That is the ultimate. Hey, let's wrap this up. I might even keep that in. So,
I didn't do it on purpose. Seriously, they're out of batteries, I promise.
Is that what you say to everybody? No.
Well, look, I should tell you, Mike, but this is my second podcast for the morning. So I have been talking an awful lot because I was on Ridopolis with RJ Barker this morning.
Yeah, I was about to say, I bet you RJ Barker was way more fun than this. He's a wild boy. I love him.
RJ's great. I also love him. It was lovely. It was just that it was very, very early in the morning. So
and
my
you did it twice.
Slightly incoherent because I've been talking a lot and I've been up for a long time.
But you did didn't you do the same thing yesterday and you just had the wrong day?
Yeah, well, I thought when I was talking to you about scheduling this, I thought that podcast was yesterday morning. This is the hassle, the hazard of being in Australia when most of your audience and colleagues are overseas, is that you have time zone differences. And I'm usually so diligent about checking 400 times to make sure that I've got the time right, because I get so panicky about getting the time wrong about these things, like scheduling author and scheduling calls with my agent and my publisher. I just used to double check it 50 times because my agent's in London and the publisher is in New York, and I'm in Canberra. So the time zones, there's no good time zone that matches all of those places at once. And so I was so afraid of inconveniencing other people and getting the time wrong. Usually I just make, as I said to Arjo this morning, usually I just make myself sick, trying, like waking up 400 times in the day, making sure I wake up on the right time and checking it. But in this case, I just blithely, stupidly said, I think Arjo had posted, or the Ridopolis account had posted, we're talking to Sam on Sunday night. And I stupidly tweeted back, Sunday morning for me, in my head being like, yes, because I'm ahead. So Sunday morning.
Right.
Which makes no sense. that's not how time works. Yeah. So that was a big screw up. At least I screwed it up in the right way. So I only inconvenienced myself rather than everybody else.
Still probably didn't feel good. Well,
it didn't feel good. No, it wasn't great. But my poor husband, as you know, is recovering from surgery and he's in a lot of pain, so he's not sleeping well. So he has been awake both times, which has at least taken off the pressure of, oh God, don't wake anybody up when I'm creeping around the house at 5 a.m. Because poor thing is awake constantly. At least I didn't have to whisper.
Man, that is brutal. Well, Sam, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on. And where can people find you?
You can find me lurking too much of the time on Twitter at Sam Hawke Writes. My website's samhawkewrites.com. I'm occasionally on Facebook, but which I assume is facebook.com/Sam Hawke Writes, but I'm not on very often. So Twitter is the easiest place to find me.
And where can people buy the books?
You can buy the books anywhere, everywhere.
Wherever people buy books.
Buy 11 or 12 copies. They should be available everywhere, all of the big nasty corporations, and hopefully your lovely local indie. If not, please order it in.
Well, and I'll end on this. One of the funniest things that I saw while researching for this interview was everybody keeps asking, what do you wish that an interviewer would ask you? And then your answer keeps going, buy 1,000 of my books. And the number just kept increasing every year. It started out at several hundred and now you're in the thousands.
Well, look, my knee grew. It's pretty hard releasing a book during a pandemic. You know, my book, the second book, came out with a big gap between the first book and the second book in a pandemic, and right like a week, I think, after the American election. So it was not a great time to be trying to sell books. So yeah, any additional copies that people want to buy will really help me out.
Hey, keep buying them so that she can win more awards, and then the introduction gets longer and longer. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Until we talk again.
Thanks so much, Mike.
I was so appreciative that she took the time out to do that interview with me, and it was a ton of fun, and I'm really looking forward to doing the second book, Hollow Empire, later on in the year or early next year or whatever. Also, when I record these, in between doing the intro and the outro, I just sit there for 10 seconds in complete silence and stare at the camera. Kind of like that episode, that Making a Murderer episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Dennis is just staring directly at the camera. And that's a reference that's going to go over probably everybody's head. But you know what? It made me laugh, so there you go. Books on the horizon. It's closing statements time. I'm feeling jacked up about what's coming next week, because next week is The Coward by Stephen Arion. If you want to check out his interview that he did with Christian Cameron, first off, it's performing way better than mine, so fuck you. No, I'm kidding. Second off, it was great, and he's awesome. Ton of fun with him. And then coming up is the Blackhawks, not the Chicago Blackhawks, but the Blackhawks by David Reich, whose name I didn't look up the pronunciation of before this, so sorry. Without further ado, which is what I say before the interviews, so that was incorrect. You know what? Even I make mistakes. Keep on reading or something. Peace.